Everybody, it's Coach Hughes here from the Be Best You podcast. Again, with the fun part about it is, you always have a tagline, and if you watch enough of these, and hopefully people will, they're gonna be like, there he goes again. But my tagline is the Be Best You, because no one's gonna follow a mess, but which is true. And I have on this podcast here, I have co-authors of a book called The Cinderella Strategy, and Graham Honiker. Hello, Graham. How are you, sir?
Hey, Coach, how we doing?
Good, great, thank you. And then Jerry Logan, and I'll allow them to introduce a little more about themselves. But how I found this out, I was during Final Fours, I listened to NPR on the way to work, and there was an interview, and I think it was Jerry. Were you on that?
It's Graham.
Right, Graham was, okay. And it was about, I think it was maybe a 4-minute interview, and I'll share it at the end and the beginning of this podcast. But it hit me because the business I'm in right now is very similar to probably like anything. And what's happening in the college and universities is the Cinderellas used to, 10, 20 years ago, you had one team make it to the Elite 16. Now you got a lot of teams getting there year after year into the 8. Some are winning. And it just struck me that a lot of our companies within our company and a lot of industries and businesses are struggling with the same things that is happening in the NCAA. And I thought that your book and your insight and your thorough research that you guys did to figure out how we got here, it would be very helpful and appropriate to a lot of people who I think will be following this podcast. So again, how I found it was just, with the portal, and I think yesterday's news, I don't know exactly where the 8 guys jumped in the portal from, I forget what football team it was yesterday. It's slipping my mind. And you had the girl from Louisville go in the portal. I was shocked. You just thought that that's a good culture. It seems like it'd be a good coach there. I wonder where she's going to go. But if you can explain a little bit about, the emphasis of the book, or why you felt this book would be helpful or interesting.
Are you okay if I lead here?
Yeah.
Again,
collaboration. That's awesome.
He knows I talk a lot, so I now have to ask permission. Yeah. Coach, it's a great question. The impetus for the book, so I've been at Butler now 11 years, was having lived this story of Butler going to back-to-back Final Fours, seeing what basketball had done for this university in so many aspects, moving to the Big East Conference, fundraising, enrollment growth, ability to build new facilities, exposure, all of that. Yet, Jerry would tell you one of my motivations was, as you read all these leadership culture books, they're primarily about companies, that we know well, Starbucks and Marriott and Southwest, and they're great companies, don't get me wrong. We thought this was a unique angle. How many books are out there on higher education or on athletics that you could study culture, leadership? On occasion, and sometimes with good reason, higher education, athletics gets a bad rap. What we found here at Butler, and by the way, shameless plug, we have a second book called Unbracketed, which came out last fall, that also examines 4 other programs: Gonzaga, Loyola Chicago, Villanova, and Davidson. That, our pitch was, yes, the book is for basketball fans, college athletics fans, but we felt it was a book that could be applied to any organization.
Yep.
And we've been fortunate to have a number of organizations reach out to us. We've obviously spoken to universities, athletic departments, but we've spoken to banks, not-for-profit organizations. So long-winded answer, but that really, we wanted to give something that any organization could hopefully read this book and take something from it. And then the last thing is that the Unbracketed book, same thing, that we felt lessons could come out of this. It was actually inspired by a book I'm guessing you and many of your listeners have read, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People.
Yeah.
What we try to take are, what are the habits integral to these organizations that have made them successful?
Yeah, it only sold a couple of copies, I think, right?
It sold more than ours, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it'll get out there, but yeah. No, but I mean, you think a lot of times when I was looking at the type of leadership that, I think my owner wants us to be, and the way he lives, it's the servant leadership thing. You got Robert Greenleaf, who kind of coined it, maybe. That's what they take credit for. But
Native Hoosier, by the way.
is he? Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I love his material. A lot of people don't know about that, and he's got some great stuff out there. But you look up and what you find yourself, there's a lot of church organizations, which makes sense that, people are looking for something and they want to go someplace to fulfill whatever they're missing or whatever they want to go search. But I know you mentioned in there, like the not the Catholic, but the faith-based universities. And I think that's Butler and Villanova and some of the other ones. And in there, you talk about the core values that a lot of the students go. So in other words, instead of going to these schools and going there for basketball and hopefully winning a championship and maybe going to the NBA, these are going to schools, hopefully maybe for that, but they're also going there for the holistic part of the game and the process, right?
Yeah, most definitely. I would say, if you take the two books, we've now looked at 5 different colleges or universities, and the second book is really trying to pull out what are the themes. But kind of the question behind both of them, at least one of the questions that intrigued me the most, is what do you do when you have some good luck or some good fortune? These are basically schools that you've invested in college basketball anyway. Mm-hmm. Your team wins some games and people notice, and all of a sudden you've won the attention lottery. And so how do you capitalize on that? That's what we've been kind of chasing. And I think in a lot of ways, the big answer is they've kind of kept doing what they were doing all along. It's just all of a sudden they were in the spotlight for it. So they were able to find ways to keep their feet on the ground, be the programs and the institutions. And it really more so is an institution than it is a program, because these programs reflect the university that they're a part of rather than the other way around, even though they're kind of the most known part of those universities in a lot of ways. We found that even as the scale might have changed and the attention might have changed, there was a deep commitment to stay with that culture and with the type of people that got them there. And I think perhaps maybe one of the best stories or illustrations of this is, this is a fairly well-known one, but when Villanova had some success under Jay Wright and all of a sudden started recruiting a different type of player, and it didn't work. And they had to have that kind of come to Jesus moment and say, no, we're going back to the type of individuals that are Villanova people and that got us there. And he had enormous and greater success after that recommitment to get in the right people, to use some Jim Collins language, to get in the right people on the bus and figuring it out from there.
Yeah, a big part of my audience will be this group of people that know that, my company started off, it took many years, trial and error, stubbed our toe, tried this, brought this person, brought that person in, but we all of a sudden grew exponentially in the last 5 or 6 years. Some of it's due to resources and exposure on television. And but the one thing that's resonated with me is people say, what did we do different? And what I say is nothing. The counter that we make our product in is the same length. The meat is the same. The bread's the same. And what we did was, to your point, and we just figured it out, was we didn't change anything. We just made sure we brought the right people in to the organization. We grew when we stopped selling, and we really figured it out when we started awarding opportunities to a franchisee. And we said, don't just keep doing what we're doing. And it's been great.
One of the themes with the Butler story, compared, going to back-to-back Final Fours in 2020, 2010 and 2011, the smallest school ever still to make, a national title game, yet alone 2, compared it a bit to winning the Powerball. That family that wins the Powerball, your life changes overnight, but then what do you do with it? And you know what money and fame and attention does to people, it can change them. And I think one of the things we had to look at here is things are going to change, but really working to stay true to who you are. What got you there? It was integrity, it was your brand, it was the student athlete experience, graduating players. So I think to your point, it's try not to do things differently, even though knowing you're in a bigger ocean now because your name is out there.
Yeah, you always think, when you're trying to bring other people in, I was talking to a gentleman last week. His name is Jim Sullivan, and he's very big in the restaurant industry. One book he wrote called Fundamentals, and it's probably the go-to handbook for most people in the restaurant industry. And then another book called Multi-Unit Leadership and How Do You Go to Scale. And he said that a lot of companies will create this culture and they'll come up with their core values, come up with their mission statement. He said, but then they don't really pay attention to who they bring in. So they go out and bring people and try to have change the people through the culture. He said, but he said a lot more eloquent than I'm trying it now, but he said that really what happens is you bring those people in and then your culture becomes those people. Right.
Yeah. What, one of the themes in the second book that we raised was continuity, the idea of continuity, and how do you do that? And you look at a lot of these schools and you look at a critical position like men's basketball head coach. And what's happened at a lot of these places is either they've been fortunate enough / had the right strategy to keep an individual there for a long time, or I should say perhaps recruited the right person, one who is willing to stay and invest in the community there and had them there a long time. Or when there has been turnover, they have kind of promoted from within. They've looked down the bench and there's been an assistant, or it's been an alum who's come back, or that sort of thing. Even at a place like Butler, where there have been a number of coaching changes, you can see the line of thinking behind each of those coaching changes and the type of individual they're looking for. And I do think it is an individual who understands and can promote and perhaps take into new eras, like right now, what we're dealing with NIL, and this is a new frontier. How can you translate an existing bit of culture into a kind of a new frontier? And I think that's the challenge and the question they're sometimes faced with. But I think the answer that folks are looking for when they make these big decisions about continuity is do we have someone who at least gets the culture piece and knows who we are, and then we challenge them with can you take it into this next era? But there's remarkable continuity, not just at this key position, men's basketball head coach, but we looked at the vice president level, we looked at ADs, presidents, and we saw a lot of continuity there. In an industry, higher ed presidents turn over about every 5 years, in an industry where there can be a lot of turnover in the transient population. So yeah, I think that's a big point, is that continuity piece.
Yeah. And again, I said earlier, because I think I have to make sure that when I say we didn't do anything different, but because on your cover, it says the same thing, is innovation. And I think that you do the same things, but you can't just keep doing the same things, because you have to innovate. And that was something that was interesting through the book too, is maybe talk to that a little bit. So you don't change, you change things. Maybe that's not the right word. Maybe change is the wrong word to use, but you keep the fundamentals there. You keep the basics there, the things that work, and you innovate, which isn't necessarily changing. You improve on them, right?
I'll give you a couple examples if I can from the first book, Butler. So an example was, again, after those Final Fours, we had a huge uptick in applications. The Flutie effect, which I'm guessing you probably have heard of. When I started, we were getting about 6,500 applications a year. Now we're starting to get 13, 14, 15,000. So things have changed. We're now also getting students applying from different areas, right? We were primarily in Western school. Now we're getting them from the coast, particularly from the Northeast. Made some strategic changes. Now we're sending our admissions counselors out to different areas. Here's where we stayed the same. The trustees and president made a hard line decision. We're not going to go above 5,000 students.
Okay.
We're going to increase a little bit, but if we go way up here, we're going to sacrifice some of our integrity in who we are. Another example on the athletic side, which we're still trying to figure out, NIL and the transfer portal. You've got to be innovative in how you're doing that. If you think about recruiting a high school athlete, you might have 3 or 4 years to evaluate them. Now in the transfer portal, you've got to move quickly because everyone is in there and recruiting. Now you might have a couple days to recruit a student athlete. But again, here you go back to your foundation. At least here, and I believe we're doing this, though I'm biased, we're still looking for somebody who fits our culture,
Right.
Who's going to take the student piece of the student athlete piece seriously. So hopefully that makes sense. But
Oh yeah.
you've got to adapt, you've got to innovate, but you've got to remember your foundation and your roots.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have a thing called the manifesto, and we say that the straightest line between 2 points is, the straightest line to is where you came from, and we're very big at making sure that we don't forget where we started from, but now also not realizing that we're not that either. But you think a lot of these young kids, the reason why they're going, because they were starting point guards in their high school, and now they're the second guy on off the bench or the third guy off the bench, and they think they're better than the first guy. So I'm going to go, and you speak to that in here too. I'm going to go to the other side. I'm going to jump to the other school because I'm going to start. And the grass isn't always greener on the other side. In this, everybody's trying to get rich or whatever they're trying to do. But are you finding that with the Jesuit type of schools or the culture type of schools and the holistic type of person that is are they less apt to jump to go to the better, brighter thing? Or
I think it's a little too early to tell. I mean, on the one hand, it seems to me like everybody's come to terms with the fact that you have to be involved in the portal to some degree. And I think, it's still so fresh and new that looking for those long-term trends about who's retaining,
yeah, I guess.
who's retaining their team, a little hard to say. I mean, one thing that really stood out to me was right after Jay Wright retired at Villanova, and they named Kyle Neptune his successor. I think it was like one person entered the transfer portal. There was no turnover in the assistant coaches. The players stayed. I think early on, to me, those are the signs of, there might be something different going on there. Even as I think Villanova just recently got a pretty high profile transfer in the portal. So even as that does have to happen, to me, you can kind of see early on some of those indicators that maybe something different's going on. They're doing the portal, but in a targeted way, in a culture-based way, looking for individuals that fit. And by that same token, it gives those individuals who don't fit, it gives them an out in a way, because that does happen too. Nobody has a perfect success rate in terms of who they're recruiting, who they're bringing in, and whether they fit well or not. But yeah, I think overall, to me, it seems like maybe it's a little too early to tell how big of an effect an institutional or a program culture is having on the turnover within rosters.
Yeah, so you look at my industry, restaurant industry, and people. There's a lot of people out there that can work. A lot of people are choosing not to. They're waiting for the best job. They want, they're negotiating for higher salaries when they haven't even proven themselves. So, you hear a lot of this stuff is I'm interviewing a guy, and he's done this and this and this, and he's asking for a salary that's 20% higher than, one, that he deserves, or two, that even the industry is paying people. And there's this like holdout mentality that, you need me more than, we need them, meaning this manager, more than they need us. And do you see and I kind of see that when sports today, because it seems like it's really about money. Do you see an end to that, or is that something that's just going to be, again, we have to learn how to deal with?
I'll let you take this one, Jerry.
Yeah, you understood the question. I think you got the question.
That's a great question. You wonder how much of it is generational. It's really hard to disentangle what COVID's done to all of us. And so I think there's still an element of sorting through that. I do think, again, just in the sliver of programs and institutions that we looked at, I think there was a sense that the players coaches, the staff, the people who passed through there really felt like even when they moved on to other jobs, to the NBA, wherever it might be, that they were still a part of that institution, that would come back. And there was kind of remarkable evidence of that, of places like Gonzaga, Villanova Davidson. We were just fortunate enough to attend a retirement ceremony for Bob McKillop at Davidson, and just to see the number of guys that came back from across generations and eras. Again, to me, that's evidence that the place matters as much as the individuals. And I think that's what you're talking about, Coach. There's like, is there a kind of mutual benefit to you need me and I need you? And is that the recognition of that second piece there, that I need you as well. And again, I think that's possible. And I think of these 4 places, we found individuals who realize the place matters. And, that might be, higher ed might have a benefit there. The campus, the kind of place-based experience is deeply woven into that experience for students and for alums, and coming back, the notion of coming back might be there in a different way for higher ed than it is perhaps in the restaurant business.
Coach, the embodiment of that is Steph Curry. If you go to Davidson, which I hope you and your listeners do, because it's an amazing place, given where he is at on the worldwide global spectrum, in a way, it's hard to believe he came out of there. It's an amazing academic school, but it's a very small school, sleepy little college town. The arena, there are a number of arenas, high school arenas in Indiana that are bigger than Davidson. And yet, whenever he talks about Davidson and Bob McKillop, it's so clear how impactful that was for him. And on the other side, obviously, how impactful he's been on Davidson. I mean, you go to a Golden State game, home or away, and you'll see people in the stands wearing Davidson jerseys. Whereas 25 years ago, even though Davidson had some tradition, that'd be unheard of.
Yeah.
Steph Curry is one of there are others, but gives back from a philanthropic standpoint in a big way. Loves going back to Davidson. And their AD said, all we need for Steph Curry is every day to wake up and be Steph Curry.
Yeah.
He's this marketing asset. So to Jerry's point, this reciprocal mutual benefit, it could go on and on about Gonzaga players, Villanova players, Butler players like Gordon Hayward. I mean, you could go on and on, but there's a special relationship, between some of these universities and their alumni.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously smaller colleges, big, there's a recruiting, there's a courtship. They're recruiting us to. My daughter was fortunate enough to have the opportunity athletically to look at certain schools. Certain schools were looking at her, and I just used one example where we had a couple of places we went to, and we had to wait a half hour for the coach, and they had nicer facilities and bigger schools. And the one that she ended up picking, the coach was waiting for us. It was a smaller school, Rochester, New York, Nazareth College. Played soccer up there. But I think so. When you're doing the recruiting, you're trying to make that mutual attraction between what you're looking for and what they're looking for. And then, is there something that you're finding some of these schools are doing to create to, one, continue to cultivate that relationship, but then also, now people are jumping, but people aren't leaving. They're staying there. And then after they're staying, they're continuing to want to be part of the organization past their career. So I recruited you, you want to come here, you're here. It shouldn't stop there, because I think a lot of times people will hire somebody and then it's just work them, and they don't continue to work on that whole person. The best do, is that what you're seeing with some of these schools, working on the whole athlete, the whole student, the whole person?
Well, one of the big mantras of the Jesuit philosophy is actually the development of the whole person. I think with almost all of these programs, we talked about servant leadership. These coaches have been servant leaders, and at the heart of servant leadership is putting your people first. And there's a reason that these players feel so indebted to, I think, their universities, because they've been developed more than just basketball players.
Hmm.
I think the other thing, I think Jerry would agree, there are a lot of people behind the scenes that enhance the experience. Now, in 3 of the cases, they happen to be religious figures, most notably Sister Jean at Loyola Chicago, who, from sending the players a scouting report before the games, which she still does, to leading them in prayer, to supporting them. People like Father Rob Hagan, who's an unsung hero at Villanova, who's the team chaplain, who was there for these players in the really down times. There's another character, Father Tony at Gonzaga. And there are others, they're academic advisors. When you surround the programs with people beyond the coach that really show that you care about them as people, that only fosters that relationship and that long tie to the university. I'll let Jerry add on here.
Yeah, I would add on to say one of the more remarkable things in looking at these 5 institutions, to me, one of the kind of real clear commonalities, and I noticed this when I first started. I didn't know anybody at Butler. I was a PhD student trying to do my dissertation, and I decided I wanted to study Butler. And so I was cold calling, trying to get a foot in the door and interview people. So I had no exposure to Butler's campus, culture, had never even been there. I started interviewing people all across the campus, the provost, the president, folks in athletics, Graham, and it was remarkable to me how often
There's exceptions to every rule, by the way.
it was remarkable to me how often, without me even asking, folks would bring up or say something to the effect of, hey, the reason we're all here is the student experience.
Yeah.
That's what we do. And then, as we start looking at these other schools, again, it was the same thing. You don't even have to kind of steer with a question. It's just going to come out. We're here for the student experience, and everything funnels into that. And athletics is a really front porch type of thing that we do that is based on the student experience. But we have I think one of my favorite parts of the newer book we wrote in bracket, it's about the pep band at Gonzaga. And they're part of the experience, the students within the band, and then the experience they're trying to create for students who attend the games. It all funnels back to the student experience. And I would imagine that has a real direct connection to the restaurant business in terms of what you're doing for the customer experience. And when you really buy in to that type of service, you kind of realize, hey, we're all rowing in the same direction here. We might have different ideas about what it looks like or different roles in terms of how we deliver that. But that came through loud and clear that the student experience was central to these institutions and the way they understood their work on a day-to-day and then over a long-term basis.
Yeah, and that's good to know too, because I mean, what'll happen is, again, you'll hire somebody for a need, you'll train them to the skill, and then then it's up to them. They should be self-motivated and just throw more money at them. And what you see, whether it be Gallup or Glassdoor, a lot of these big companies, and they do the research, and this is new because I think there's more companies doing this research. But I remember 30 years ago, reading stuff about that. Employees didn't put pay first or position first. They put, I just wanted to be treated respectfully. I wanted to go to work and enjoy myself. I had I'm going to be 58 this year, and I'm been with the company a long time. And I had a gentleman, and he said that, you have a job, you have a career. And if you can have a job and a career where what you do is your passion, you're pretty lucky. But if you can make your passion your purpose, and when he said that to me, I was like, holy crap. Like, I've been kind of figuring out what, I know what I do, but why do I do it? And when he said that, I was like, wow, that's part of it. And what I try to teach people is, when you're hiring somebody and you're onboarding them, that's not where it ends. That's just the beginning. And you have to really put calculated effort out there to every day, not just put a mission statement up on the wall, not just have your core values, on a t-shirt, but every day integrate and work on that person. And that
So
sounds
coach,
Yep.
a couple quick things. The exemplars in this second book, if we're not plugging it enough unbracketed, are the
Oh,
are the head coaches at these programs who really, with empirical evidence, were far more motivated to by their personal enjoyment of the programs they were at, by the culture of the programs that were at, building their own shops per se. Mark Few has passed up about every big time coaching gig in the country, some several times over, because he loved Gonzaga.
yeah.
He could have made a lot more money at almost all of those, at a number of other big programs that came after him. Jay Wright, I mean, passed up the 76ers job twice.
Yeah.
Passed up Kentucky. Bob McKillop, same thing. So they, in terms of setting an example for the student athletes about, it's not always about the grass is greener. They are exemplars of that. We also tell the story in the first book of Brad Stevens, which I'm not sure how many people know. Brad Stevens graduates from college, starts at Eli Lilly Corporation, a major pharmaceutical company based out of Indianapolis, making a really good salary in the marketing department, and says, you know what? This isn't my purpose. And a year in, he quits, much to his parents and his girlfriend's chagrin. And he decides to become a volunteer basketball coach at Butler. And the rest is history. So going back to your point about your drive, your commitment, it's not always based on the money.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I had an gentleman, his name is Robert Glazer. He wrote a book called Elevate Your Team. If you guys want to look at it. And he was talking about how, when you're bringing people in, you're working on the whole person. You bring them in and you train them for the job they're doing, but the best companies train you for the job that you're going to hopefully do when the company grows. And too often, as the company grows, you outgrow that person's skill set. And you take coaches, for example, who are trying to create culture, and how do they do that? And that's kind of what I kind of pulled from that is, you have all these other people around there who they want to ask for help. They're looking to go to these other pieces, these other resources. Guys, I apologize. I'm not sure why. I think somebody has the wrong link here. If you hear the bleeping coming in. Let me just do one thing real quick here. We do a Zoom call and I'll delete this obviously, but there's somebody trying to come into the wrong link. Crazy. I apologize. These things happen, right?
No worries. Yep.
It's 6 people. Can you see the people trying to come in?
No, it doesn't do anything at least on my end. I don't know about yours.
Hey, Brooke, are you, what is your password? Are people coming in on your end? Okay. All right. There's 6 people trying to come in on this podcast that I'm on right now. So I'm just going to keep popping them out. Very good. All right. All good. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye. No, it's all good. Bye. Sorry about that. So I'll pop these out. So before every class, we get on a Zoom call and we talk about driving in New Jersey. Can't pump your own gas, all kinds of crazy. A lot of these kids, young managers, in some cases, never traveled before. And so we're trying to, do the right thing and be servient to them. So, and then we're in San Diego next week I got 150 people out there. So it's a 4-day class. So I don't know why they're popping in on this. Somebody wants to be on the podcast, I guess. So, but again, I won't keep you guys too much longer. Anyhow, I know you said you had to go, but how can I? So if what I'll do is, how do I bring it back to the 3 quadrants there? I'll just reverse it back, and we'll start with that. Does that sound good? All right. And you can't hear the beeping coming in?
No, nothing.
All right, perfect. All right. So I'll just put it up. All right. So guys, in your book there, I noticed, which is also interesting, you have these 3, I'm just going to call them quadrants. Maybe there's something else, but you have culture as a larger piece. And hopefully you'll get the books. And then you have innovation, which we spoke a little bit about, and you have the risk taking. So is there maybe one thing from each one of those there? And then, we'll kind of bring this conversation to an end, but those three things, they're on the cover. So would those be three major things that you think people need to consider when they're trying to build a successful organization?
Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah. As well, I can take the risk taking. One of my favorite parts about the Butler story is we try to kind of tell a really long arc in the narrative in that book about where Butler was and how they had really fallen on some hard times. And they had a president named Jeff Bannister who came in and basically said, we got to try to kickstart something here. We got to take some risks, or else you just kind of drown that slow death of of not really trying anything. So he looked around and said, well, I'm in Indiana. They like basketball here.
Yeah.
We have this giant arena that's historic and classic and sure needs some refurbishment, but we've got it. It's sitting in our backyard. So he took the risk to put money that I would say the institution maybe didn't necessarily have. they did dip into the endowment, which is can be a bit of a no-no. But he said this is kind of a calculated risk. So he did that, and he also invested deeply in the campus and changing it from what felt like a commuter school to a destination, a place people would want to come and stay. And those were big risks, I think, given the financial picture of the university at that time. But they were sensible risks. Like, hey, I'm waiting for this pitch, and when I see it, I'm swinging hard. And I see that pitch, I'm swinging. And so I think that's a part of the story, is that risk taking, but underlying it is that it was a sensible risk. It made sense. It doesn't necessarily perhaps make sense to invest in basketball if you're in Hawaii. I don't know. I'm just kind of picking a state, but in Indiana, man, that's a language there that folks understand it, that they're interested in, and that really matters. And so I think when you see that risk-taking piece, it's also worth bearing in mind that the risks, there was some prudence to them, and a calculation to them that was made before they were taken. But when they took them, boy, did they take them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you think about that, you want to build a company and you want to attract people to, again, like the commuter school, but then the destination point. And, that makes a lot of sense there. So what about the I guess the innovation and the culture part? I mean, we talked about the innovation part. I guess maybe the culture piece would be the best way to maybe wrap this up.
I think the culture is really everything. We in my workplace here, we've got several signs up that read culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't walk around my office, my division here, without seeing it, but it's really everything when you think about, simple things. Employees that are happy and are happy with the culture are going to be more productive. They're going to miss less days during the year at the office. They're going to build their teammates up. You're going to have less turnover. Your brand is going to become stronger. And again, we were really fortunate to identify 5 universities that we thought had good culture, but we dove in, and none of them are perfect.
Right.
But that really, really put culture at the forefront of everything that they were doing. And the other part of that is trying to universities, even the ones that we covered, most of which are fairly small, they're still pretty big enterprises. How do you spread that culture across the campuses? And one of the themes we found, there was a strong alignment with the university side and the athletic side with all of these institutions. But culture is at the heart of it. And how do you I'm sorry, did you guys lose me?
Yeah, I did right there. So
Sorry. It's recruiting for culture, be it a student athlete, but also an employee. When we hire here at Butler, it's
Yeah.
not always easy, but you're really trying to think in that interview, how is this going to person fit in from a culture standpoint. I have maybe a corny saying that it's hard to be a jerk here at Butler, whether you're a student athlete. Some might point to me and again say there's exceptions to every rule, but that you're not going to fit if you're not a team player, you don't get along well with others, you're not trying to build people up.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate it. And again, being a son of a basketball coach and an aspiring basketball player until I stopped growing at 5'6". And unfortunately, the way I would have played basketball forever, but I'm not a bench guy, and I knew I wasn't going to get in. So I started running, and somehow I was good at that, even though I didn't like it. And that was the only way I was getting into college. It wasn't my grades. And, I'm a big, huge fan, and there's nothing like college basketball, I don't think. And I'm a big Curry fan. He brought the small ball back because I love, John Stockton. I'm a big John Stockton, Steve Kerr, all those kind of guys. But that was not a hard read for me to pick up your book. But then I really think that there is a connection between what's happening in today's work environment. How do you build companies? People are leaving in the portal. They're trying to make money without really any talent. I think there was something I read yesterday or 2 days ago where the 10 of the top 15 NIL athletes aren't even that good on the team. They're just pretty, or they, whatever it is. And it's kind of a shame, that the reason these kids' likenesses should be their talent, not because they're good looking. It's a different world today.
The great thing for me, Coach, I never would have gotten an NIL deal on either of those aspects. So
yeah, me neither. I hear you on that one. True. So, but I will.
I didn't need you to verify that, but
yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, sorry about that. Well, I'm the same thing. I got my eyebrows are too big, and I had to put a little tanning stuff on here so I didn't blind you guys. But no, I appreciate it, and I'm hoping the recording. I don't know what's going on here. People are popping in on this thing, but so if people hear bings during the interview, you guys can deal with it. Had to listen to worse stuff, but I know that the content of this conversation will be helpful to many of the guys that I work with every day. That it validates what they're doing, and big fan. And I will be ordering your next book, the book you guys just put out. And, if there's something in there, I can get back on with you guys. I'd love to be able to share with you again. But so
absolutely. I would offer, Jerry's not too far from me up in Boston, and I'm in the New York, New Jersey area several times a year. So if you ever want us to, you get us a lot of free subs, we'll come do it at no cost.
Absolutely. And that we can make that happen. So I do have to say, my dad is, I grew up, going to many, many Seton Hall games. He was a local basketball coach here in the Jersey Shore and graduated from Seton Hall. And so we're Hall guys. And it was nice to see the Hurley brothers do pretty well. Obviously it's amazing what that Danny Hurley story is pretty crazy. Just knowing what he went through and all that kind of stuff, and that he did what he did, it's pretty neat. Legacy, great to talk about a legacy. So I appreciate it. Graham and Jerry, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day. And I will get this podcast sent out to you guys. It's Coach Hughes from the Be Best You podcast. We'll see you again.
Awesome.
Thanks so much. Coach.
Thank you. Thank you.